Thank you. Okay, just for those if anybody's picking up this recording, if anybody's actually listening to this after the fact, we began a minute ago, but just by introducing a couple of little things, but the class is actually just beginning now. It began with the failure of the screen share and gave us a little speech, which I've never encountered before. Let's see if it works now.
Your screen sharing is paused. You have started a screen share.
Has anybody encountered that in a Zoom meeting before?
Maybe it's an update.
Well, yeah, maybe, but it's kind of scary.
I've already got it up on Safari. If you want me to share my screen, see if that works.
If necessary, I like to have control of it just because I'm a control freak. But just so I can move it around as I need to.
Jason Winston, he, him, to everyone. It's like HAL has taken over your computer.
Oh my God, you must have on something, a voice activation somewhere.
Obviously AI talking.
Because he's going to interrupt, people talk in the chat.
Yeah,
his voice is going to interrupt us.
Yeah, I have no idea. Well, let's pursue this. That's very strange.
Yeah.
And that voice indicated, I didn't hear it entirely, but it said something like someone such and such has taken over your computer.
But it's because it's what I typed in the chat. It read it out loud.
Oh,
yeah.
You have something activated that's reading. I'm afraid to type something else in there now because
yeah, me too.
I needed some humor in my life this morning. Thank you.
It didn't repeat mine. Let me try that one more time. Huh. Well, maybe now, Wendy, if this persists, I will give you control, even if I get it to come up, because it's just annoying.
Okay, it's not doing it now. That's good.
Well, I haven't done anything yet.
No, but it's not talking, but there's a lot of chat going on.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Desktop 11 items selected.
What? Oh.
Okay, Wendy, I guess it's up to you. You
might have too many documents up to share easily.
No, I don't know. That's not what I don't know what the problem is, but it's not because I have other documents up, because I always have other documents up when I screen share.
Because it said you had 11 documents up.
Right.
Wow.
It says you disabled screen sharing, so you have to allow screen sharing.
I understand. Give me a second.
Okay, just letting you know.
You want to go out?
All right. Under what rubric do I share? All right. Oh, I know what I'm doing wrong here. I was looking at the wrong place. All right. Wendy.
Wendy is the co-host now.
Okay.
All right. So Wendy, we'll have to see how good a partnership we have. Can you enlarge the font?
Oops, I just clicked on the wrong thing. Where's my Zoom button? Give me just a second. I have to figure out where to stick that over there. How do I zoom in Firefox? Is it over here? Up there it is. I just found it. Okay. Is that good or more?
And are you also able to fill the whole screen, enlarge the whole screen, enlarge the screen?
Crap. How do I do you know how to do that?
What?
I don't know Firefox that well. How do I enlarge this?
It looks pretty big to me. It's on my
Looks
screen.
good. Yeah, it's huge on my screen.
All right, good enough. So let's go through the first few verses and we'll look at the text. I guess let's just begin with a little bit of a reminder, okay? Abraham moves to Canaan when he's 75 years old. We learn later that Sarah is 10 years younger, so she's 65. They make a life for themselves in Canaan, but don't have any kids. This is so frustrating that Sarah gives Abraham permission to take Hagar as a concubine, which he does, and by Hagar he has Ishmael. But it turns out Sarah really didn't mean it, and she's kind of upset, and she has Abraham expel Hagar, but then he brings her back. Time passes, and four angels, in the form of human beings, come to Abraham and say, next year you're going to have a kid. And so they do have a kid, and you know that he's 100 and she's 90. Now, by my lights, it's never interesting to debate whether they really weren't, whether people could really be that old in those days. They probably couldn't, they probably weren't. But the idea is that you have these two elderly people who miraculously have a kid well beyond childbearing years. And of course, the kid is Isaac. The kid is born. Sarah gets jealous of Hagar because it looks like Ishmael, with a very close reading, it looks like Ishmael is making fun of Isaac. And Sarah gets jealous and this time expels Hagar and Ishmael for good. They go off to live in Egypt. And, and because of the existence of Ishmael, we have Islam, and as I'm sure you all know. So their lives continue. I don't have a text open in front of me to be sure about this. What chapter is this? The last story is the binding of Isaac, chapter 22. And then this chapter opens a new parsha. And the first thing that happens is Vayehi Chaye Sarah Mea Shana Ve'esrim Shana V'Sheva Shanim Shnei Chaye Sarah. So Sarah's lifetime, the span of Sarah's life came to 127 years. So do the math, and it's clear that Isaac is 36, 37 years old. That's within the reality of the story and it's when in the next chapter, when Abraham sends a servant off to the old country to get a wife for Isaac, it's for his middle-aged son. He's heading toward his 40s. But here's you may know the midrashic thing here that I'm about to tell you, and even though I don't think it's the intent of the author of the Akedah, it raises interesting possibilities. One of which played a significant role sometime in the Middle Ages in Europe. So the story goes, in the Midrash writer's mind, in the Darshan's mind, that Abraham is on his way to Moriah to go up on a hill, on a mountain, and sacrifice his son. And Satan, good old Satan, shows up to tell Sarah that Abraham is about to sacrifice Isaac. And he proves it to her. And she has a heart attack and dies. And that itself raises interesting things, because it sort of asks the question, why wasn't Sarah part of the process? How could Abraham, well, we could imagine how, but how could Abraham go and leave his wife unaware of what's going to happen, with the strong possibility on Abraham's mind 3 days ago that he was going to come back without Isaac? True to her maternal instincts, not to mention that she's in her 90s, she hears this shocking news and she dies. How do we know? Because this happened the day after, right? She dies right away, and we know she was 137 years old, 27 years old, which means that Isaac is 37 years old when Abraham has taken him up to the mountain to cut his throat. What does that tell us about Isaac? What does it tell us about Abraham and Isaac? this possibility is true, which I'm going to say now for the third time, I don't think was on the mind of the writer, but plays out in interesting ways. There's another part to this that I want to bring up. And Wendy, I'm going to ask you to scroll back before here and see if we can get to this. Keep going. We got to get to the end of the Akedah story. I stop right there. Let's see. Down a little bit. A little more. Okay, a little more. A little more. Okay. Abraham then returned to his servants, and they departed together for Be'er Sheva, and Abraham stayed in Be'er Sheva. Who's missing?
Sarah.
No, Isaac. Isaac's
Oh.
missing. Right? So
But
they-
isn't Sarah also missing? Because isn't she in Hebron?
yeah, but she's not in the story at all. Abraham goes up with Isaac, and he
Mhm.
comes down by himself, even though we know that Isaac's life was spared. So out of this grows a whole midrashic tradition that Isaac, in fact, was sacrificed, but was resurrected. That's one tradition. Another tradition is that Isaac is in such shock that he goes off to somewhere else and goes to study in a yeshiva. But the puzzle is, why isn't Isaac named as going down the mountain? And so out of this grows the story, which, as I say, had some usefulness in the Middle Ages, that Isaac was sacrificed, he was resurrected, and he was 37 years old. And that sounds like somebody else that we know. And that Isaac then becomes a kind of a Jesus figure for the Jews. You guys had your Jesus figure, but ours was hundreds of years earlier, the saying goes. I don't have another explanation as to why the author doesn't have Isaac coming down with Abraham.
The third possibility is that Isaac got really pissed off and said, "Dad is totally lunatic, and I'm getting out of here."
Yeah, that's in line. That's in line in the same order of that he goes off to study at yeshiva. No, and in fact, what is her name? Aviva Zornberg traces elements of what she sees as the author indicating Isaac's how the trauma of this affects Isaac in the Bible, not through the Midrash necessarily, throughout the rest of his life. I mean, one is his character of the three patriarchs. He's the most passive. The other, and then there's other wonderful Midrash that as Abraham is about to sacrifice Isaac, the angels that are there, the angels conveniently appear when Midrash writers want them to, and they start to weep copiously, and some of the angels' tears fall into Isaac's eyes. And that's what accounts for Isaac's blindness in his old age. That this, a lot of interesting little things. But we're going to, from this point, I think we're going to stick with the plain meaning of the text. So maybe when he's in his mid-30s, think about starting a family. Reflects, yeah, that too. So, why is he single as he in his actually it's not his mid-30s anymore. He's headed toward his late 30s. And we may and if we get to the end of the story, the second chapter, maybe we'll rush things so that we do, because the ending is very interesting and also plays into this idea that he's traumatized by this. Who wouldn't be? You're 8 years old. Your old man ties you up and throws you on a bunch of pieces of wood, and he sees his dad coming at him with a knife. That would be that's a pretty extreme form of child abuse. But let's get back to the death of Sarah. So Wendy, you got to take us up a little bit. But Tamat Sarah b'Kiryat Arba, he Chevron be'Eretz Canaan, v'yavo Avraham lispod l'Sarah v'liv kota. Now that small cuff is there. I don't remember why that's so. But Sarah died in Kiryat Arba, now Hebron, in the land of Canaan, and Abraham proceeded to mourn Sarah and to bewail her. And the Rashi that shouts out in my head when I see this kind of duplication tells me something. It would be sufficient to say he came to mourn for Sarah, but then it adds believe kota, and it's translated here as bewail, to cry out for her. So that duplication, I think it's a fair assumption to say that the author is telling us that duplication means that is an indication of the total sadness that Abraham is experiencing. He's gone through a lot with her. They've created a people. They've created little settlements for themselves around Canaan, although they don't own property. Right? They have not yet purchased any kind of land. They're renters, or less. They're renters in this country.
Rabbi, can I ask a little Hebrew question? In
Yeah.
that last word, there's a letter in the middle that's smaller than the rest, and I can't imagine that's in.
I said I don't. I said it's a cough, and I said I don't know why it's there.
Oh, you did. Okay.
It should be. I mean, I'm not sure that necessarily we know why, but there must be grammarians who've speculated why. But
do you know if when they write the Torahs out on a scroll, if they do it differently?
No, I believe it's in the Torah scroll also.
Oh.
All right. Then Abraham rose from beside his dead, and he spoke to the Hittites, saying, Ger v'toshav anochi imachem, tenuli achuzat kever imachem, ve'ekbara mati milifanai. So it is a kind of a funny thing. He's finished. Here's another aspect of time that the Torah is not helping us with. We don't know how long this period of mourning has lasted, but she's still not buried. He rises from his grief, and he turns to the Hittites among whom he lives, and he says, and this is a. Can you take us back, Wendy? Thank you. This phrase "ger toshav" continues throughout the Bible. Ger toshav, it's translated as resident alien, which is an accurate translation. It's like somebody who has the green card, lives, but he hasn't yet taken the citizenship exam. I'm a resident alien among you, and I got to buy me some. I got to start the first Jewish cemetery in the whole history of the Jewish people. So I need for you to sell me something. And the Hittites replied to Abraham, saying to him, go down, please. Hear us, my Lord, you are the elect of God among us. Bury your dead in the choicest of our burial places. None of us will withhold his burial place from you for burying your dead. So I throw out to you, what is that telling us? The response. What is and note, of course, this is not attributed to any specific person. So it seems to reflect the sentiment of his neighbors altogether. So what is it telling you? I mean, I see a couple of things in there. What do you see in that phrase, in that verse?
And he was very respected.
Okay, it's very respected. Totally. What? Anything else?
Perhaps they had accepted God, Abraham's God as theirs, because they say you are the elect of God among us. That implies they buy into his his perspective on God.
Yeah. Now, it's a possibility, but I'm thinking of several instances where Gentiles seem well disposed toward the religion of the Israelites. This being one of those cases. The sailors on the boat with Jonah, being another one.
Yeah.
In fact, the Ninevites being another.
Yeah.
Also, the prophet Bilam, who's not an Israelite, is a prophet of Yahweh. Those are ones that come to mind. Oh, and also Moses' father-in-law, Yitro, Moses' father-in-law, comes after the crossing of the sea. Yitro shows up and both accepts and is accepted by the Israelites. And if you remember, gives Moses some rather necessary, needed advice as to how to organize the people. So there are lots of, and those are what just come to mind. And then there's Job. Job isn't a Jew. He lives off in Uz. He's not a Jew, and that whole story is about him and God. So those are, I lost count, but those are 5 or 6 places where God and Gentiles have a good relationship, but they're not necessarily converts, except the sailors. The sailors on the boat with Jonah, or with Jonah off the boat, seem to actually be going through a conversion process.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
This is on the word ger that's used, that he's a resident alien. Is that the same word ger that is used for people who are new to Judaism nowadays?
It's the same word, yeah.
Yes, okay.
Yeah. Ger Gioret. Yeah. Okay. Anybody see anything? I mean, he's welcome among these people. They seem to, they recognize his God. Anything else?
I would just say that they also have burial practices. So in some ways they have some similarities, and they seem to be incredibly generous. I mean, you can have people live among you, but still not be, generous to them. And here, they clearly share some practices around burial, that there has to be a place for it, and there's it sounds like there's something sacred to them as well, that they can understand why it's important for Abraham to have a burial place.
Yeah, and we can expand this for just a little bit. I don't want to. Well, I want to try to get to the end of the next chapter, but what happens? What happens when a Jewish community that hadn't yet been established moves into a settlement? What happens when Jews move into Riverside and they have a death?
They establish a Jewish cemetery.
Well, not in this case, right?
No, not in this case.
And in fact, why this comes to mind is because, I mean, in my experience as a rabbi, there are 2 options, maybe more than 2, but 2 basic options. The synagogue owns the cemetery and maybe shares it with other Jews who aren't part of the synagogue. And then, or what else do? They go to a local cemetery, sometimes maybe owned by a funeral home, maybe somehow it's a civic cemetery. And what do? What do we do here? What did we do here?
They get a section of the cemetery, becomes the Jewish part.
This is history's first instance of the second model. So, but we'll see how it actually develops. They're saying, yeah, we'll give you the northeast corner of our cemetery, but we'll see what actually happens. Okay.
Separate but equal comes to my mind.
Well, yeah, we're all equal in death, and equal in paying for the funeral for the section of the cemetery. All right. I think we skipped a verse. Wendy, I think. And the Hittites replied to Abraham, saying to him, "Oh no, I guess not. I beg your pardon. Go ahead. Go down, please." There we go. Thereupon Abraham bowed low to the landowning citizens, the Hittites. He said to them, "If it is your wish that I remove my dead for burial, you must agree to intercede for me with Ephron, son of Zohar." Keep going. That he may sell me the kingdom of Machpelah that he owns, which is at the edge of his land. Let him sell it to me at the full price for a burial site in your midst.
Yeah.
He's kind of saying, right? I don't want no section in your cemetery. I don't need no stinking cemetery. He wants the cave of Machpelah.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know, the historian in me wonders if this story isn't written after the fact of the cave of Machpelah already being known as a place where the matriarchs and patriarchs are buried.
Mhm.
But in any event, that's what Abraham wants. He wants the cave of Machpelah. And however old the cave of Machpelah is, it's very old. And I mean, it's still there in Hebron. It's a shared, it's a site shared between Jews and Muslims. It's an uncomfortable sharing. I don't want to get into politics about that. It's an uncomfortable sharing because, for Muslims, of course, Abraham and Sarah are important characters too. Abraham's buried there, but he wants the cave of Machpelah. So let's see what happens. You got to intercede on my behalf with Ephron, and Ephron Yoshev b'toch b'nei Chet v'yan Ephron hachiti et Abraham be'oznei v'nei Chet l'chol ba'ei sha'ar iro lemor. So Ephron was present among the Hittites. He was there. So Ephron the Hittite answered Abraham in the hearing of the Hittites in the assembly of the town's gate, saying, keep going. No, my lord, hear me. I give you the field, and I give you the cave that is in it. I give it to you in the presence of my people. Kvor metecha, bury your dead. So it sounds like the voice of generosity. Abraham, the people say, Abraham says to the people, intervene for my behalf with Ephron. But Ephron hears it and he says, oh, no, don't worry about those guys. It's yours. Just, I will give it to you in the presence of all my people. Kavor beitecha. Abraham bowed low before the landowning citizens and spoke to Ephron in the hearing of the landowning citizens, saying, if only you would hear me out, let me pay the price of the land, accept it for me, that I may bury my dead. And Ephron replied to Abraham, saying to him, my lord, do hear me. A piece of land worth 400 shekels of silver. What is that between you and me? Go and bury your dead. The shekels, of course, isn't the coin currently worth 25 cents in Israel. This is a weight of silver, and though I can't give you an exact value, it's quite pricey. So starting off saying 400 shekels. What is that between you and me? I don't need. What do I need with that money? Go ahead, please. Bury Sarah there. Abraham accepted Ephron's terms. Wait, am I missing something here? Wait a second.
No.
No, he's not giving it to. What people who understand these things say is that 400 shekels is highway robbery.
Mhm.
After all that, let me bury my poor wife, in your cemetery. And the owner says, okay, please be my guest, bury your wife there for a mere $25,000. What's that $25,000 to me? But Abraham has the money and he wants to bury Sarah, and so he purchases it. Abraham accepted Ephron's terms. Abraham paid out to Ephron the money that he had named in the hearing of the Hittites, 400 shekels of silver at the going merchant's rate. It's not true. So Ephron's land in Machpelah near Mamre, the field with its cave and all the trees anywhere within the confines of the field, passed to Abraham and his possession in the presence of the Hittites of the assembly in the town's gate. Then we'll stop here for a second and talk about this a little bit. Then Abraham buried his wife Sarah in the cave of the field of Machpelah, facing Mamre, now Hebron, in the land of Canaan. So is there any takeaway? This is one more. Thus the field with its cave passed from the Hittites to Abraham as a burial site. So what are the takeaways from this?
Seems to me it's a negotiating tactic that they were using back then, because it's similar to what some people do today, where they go through a whole discussion and then there's a payment at the end. Oh, it's yours, that kind of thing. And then, but actually they want money, and everybody understands they want money. It's understood.
So totally, it's a negotiation.
Yes.
And what what results from this negotiation? Well, he gets the property, we know that, and he willingly overpays, we know that. What else? Why do you think the text mentions so many times that this is done in public, that it's done before the rest of the Hittites? It's not a private.
So there's no question of ownership.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's no question of ownership because they probably didn't have a city hall with deeds and, you know, with records of ownership. But now everybody knows that Abraham willingly allowed himself to get ripped off so that he can have the first piece of property that he owns in all of Canaan. And that is in order to bury his wife. Who else is buried there? Do you remember? I don't remember exactly myself, but I'm thinking mostly that
I think
What was the question?
who else is buried?
Jacob or Joseph? Jacob or Joseph comes to my mind. I don't know for sure, but and I don't know why I'm saying Jacob or Joseph.
One more time. What's the question?
Who is buried?
Who else?
Machpelah?
who is Mappa? Yeah.
Oh, who else is buried?
Who's buried
Why?
in the tomb?
Yeah,
Is Abraham buried there?
Yeah. The thing I'm
Yeah.
most thinking of is that doesn't Jacob make his kids promise to bring him back to Canaan, and that when the Israelites leave, I'm sorry for not being clear about this. They're either leaving with Joseph or Jacob's bones. Can anybody?
Mm.
someone look it up on the website on their cell.
We'll come back to it. I should have thought of this question in advance and looked.
I know it
Rabbi?
says that the patriarchs, and it's plural, are buried there.
Yeah, but
So
the patriarchs.
I don't know.
Isaac is probably buried there, and Rebecca is probably buried there. But the question is, what I don't remember is whose bones do they bring back? It's pretty easy to find, but I don't want to get bogged down in it because I got this other big fish I want us to fry.
Yeah, I got a site here that says Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Sarah, Rebecca, and Leah. That's what I'm coming up with over here.
Okay, and I guess Rachel's not there because she dies on her way back from the old country in birth, if I recall. I'm sorry for being a little vague about this. All right, so thus the field with this cave passed from the Hittites to Abraham as its burial site. Now let's move down just a little bit.
I have a question, Rabbi. Is ashes to ashes and dust to dust comes to my mind. And I'm wondering, is there an inference here of, or a comparison that it's okay to be buried in a crypt, in a hole in a wall, in other words, does the cave imply being buried in the ground, or is there something that tells us as Jews that it's okay to be buried in crypts?
Well, I'm not sure what you mean by a crypt in this case, but they're not necessarily buried in the ground.
Yeah, that seems strange to me.
Well, Jews are not necessarily buried in the ground.
Right. My whole family are in crypts. I'm not going to, but I was just wondering about that.
Okay. All right. So Sarah dies. Sarah is buried in the cave of Machpelah. Abraham owns some property. And now Abraham's got to attend to other business. He's sitting around one day and he's, "Oy, Gewalt, I got a 37-year-old son and he's single. And he's like 15 years past marriageable age. But Baruch Hashem, I'm a wealthy guy, and it's time for him to get married. And he's going to do the same, well, not exactly the same. He's going to do what happens by happenstance to Jacob. Jacob's going to get his spouses back in the old country. And Abraham, well, we'll see, and we'll raises an interesting question, I think. So Avraham zakein ba'yabamim ba'Adonai beirach et Avraham bakol. Abraham was now old, advanced in years, and God had blessed Abraham in all things. So, of course, what's that telling you? It's telling you that he's a wealthy guy. He was probably a wealthy guy. Well, he was probably a man of some wealth when he immigrated. And then there were these two instances, the most important of which being when he goes down to Egypt, and Sarah pretends that she's Abraham's sister. And when they leave, Pharaoh gives them all kinds of stuff. Here, take all this stuff and just get the heck out of here. I'm done with you. So he's a wealthy guy, and he made money on his own, and he's getting on in years. Well, he's at least how old? How old? If this is the next day after he buries Sarah, he's at least how old?
137.
He's at least 137.
37. Yes.
At least 137, and he's still a good-looking guy. Because if we get to this, which we may not, you'll see after this he gets married again. He marries Keturah and has more kids, and he doesn't have any problem siring those kids. So probably the notion that it was Sarah who was barren might have been true, or Abraham found he discovered Viagra in his very old age, but now he says I gotta get the kid a wife. So Abraham said to a senior servant of his household, who had charge of all that he owned, "Put your hand on my thigh." Now we're going to get to the thigh in a second. There are places where significant action takes place, and I'm thinking of two other scenes, but both in the beginning of the book of Exodus, where the characters are not named. In the book of Exodus, no, I beg your pardon. There are not two scenes. There's one scene, but there's the scene where Moses's mother, Moses's sister, and Moses's and Pharaoh's daughter don't have names, and the anonymity of it always intrigues me. That the author wants us to see that the center of the action is not necessarily on the characters, but the action that the characters are doing. Here, we know that Abraham has a servant named Eliezer. He has a couple of appearances earlier, but it may well be that this is Eliezer because he's named as I want to see what the Hebrew is. Abraham, Vayomer Abraham El Avro Avdo Zakein Beito. Yeah, it's translated here as the senior servant of the household. But he's not named, and he never gets a name. We don't know who he is, and yet Abraham gives him an important task, and it puts the action on the other people with whom he's going to interact. Now, put your hand under my thigh. I learned this my first year of rabbinical school with Yigal Yanai in Friday afternoon Tanakh class, Friday morning Tanakh class. Apparently, there was an ancient way of taking an oath where the person making the oath puts his hand on the penis of the person to whom he's making the oath. So when it says here, place your hand under my thigh, it's not exactly what it means. It means grab a hold of my penis. And for some reason that's a way of making an oath. And I will make you swear by Yahweh, the God of heaven and the God of earth, that you will not take a wife for my son from the daughters of the Canaanites among whom I dwell. So we hold still. Scroll back just a bit, please. There you go. Thank you. What do we learn from that? There are a couple of things.
Canaanites were verboten to him.
Okay, so the obvious question is why?
Probably due to their practices.
He doesn't want their religion in his home, perhaps?
But he's going to send the servant back to the old country. They're pagans too. And we'll see what actually happens.
They're keeping it within the family. It's endogamous.
Yeah.
And the way I just read an article by Carol Meyer, and she has a book actually on the household of ancient Israel. And this is very common, particularly in the hill country, because they marry within the family, and they set up compounds specifically that are extended family compounds. And this is done for the labor, and that's one of the reasons we have all of these very strict incest rules, is because these families that are connected are living together. But how is Abraham? I think the question is, Abraham, God has promised Abraham that his people will be a unique people. And we see this come to fruition in Exodus. So how is he going to do this? Well, he can't dilute the bloodline with Canaanite blood and Canaanite beliefs. So he has to go back to the old country. And at least there's an acknowledgement there of what has happened to Abraham, and that Abraham believes in a specific God. So I think this is the first instance where the uniqueness of the Hebrew people is illustrated. How do we continue this line? How do I continue God's promise? How do I make sure that my descendants believe what I believe? Because it's so radically different.
Okay, so I don't want to get how do you say, too down into the weeds in this, because it turns out that you're right, but the proposition that Abraham is making to the servant doesn't guarantee that. But we can talk about that in a moment. But it turns out that you're right. The servant finds a relative, but he doesn't go specifically to find a relative. It happens by, it happens. Yeah. It happens in a miraculous kind of way. Although we can speculate on this a little bit more when we get to it. But good. So, but go to the land of my birth, get a wife for my son Isaac. And ki el artsi et moladati telech v'lakachta isha livnei liyitzchak. Livni, I beg your pardon, livni liyitzchak. I'm still. I mean, Jane. I mean, you're like I say, you're right. Though you're getting ahead of the story. So I'm hemming and hawing here. Let's just press on. So the servant said to him, "What if the woman doesn't consent to follow me to this land? Shall I then take your son back to the land from which you come?" And Abraham answered him, "On no account must you take my son back there." So you've got this puzzle. Now with the God of heaven who took me from my father's house, from my native land, who promised me on oath that I will assign you this land to your offspring, will send a messenger before you, and you will get a wife for my son from there. So it's a puzzlement, right? It's a puzzlement. You can't take a wife from among these guys who live, from among the women with whom I'm in the midst of whom I live. You got to go back and get a woman from back there, but do not take Isaac back there. He belongs here. And so if you fail to come back with a woman, then we're absurus. And I don't know what plan B is going to be, Abraham is saying. But,
Rabbi, what's the difference between I should know this, the Hittites and the Canaanites?
Well, if I got it right, and I may not, everybody who lives on that piece of property is a Canaanite. But then the Jebusites, the Hittites, the Perizzites,
okay,
different people. So it's like, what was I telling somebody? if I can't remember this, I'm not going to dig into my head.
Okay, so the Canaan refers to the people who live in the land of Canaan. It's more general.
I believe so. Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
And the Hittites were very aggressive people.
Yes, they were
They were
warriors.
conquerors.
Yes.
Okay. But now you got a faith statement from Abraham. He says, look, I know that you see this as a problem, Mr. Servant, but I got faith in God because God's a little slow on the draw about building me a land full about building me a nation. But the nation that I'm going to give birth to has to be here. It has to be in this place. And so God will send, Yishalach Malacho. God will send his servant. It's the word for, it's a typical word for servant. And you will get a wife for my son there. Okay, let's continue. Of course, if you have any questions or points, please speak up. And if the woman doesn't consent to follow you, you shall then be clear of this oath to me, but do not take my son back there. Get a wife from there, but don't, the place is okay to bring, for there to be a wife for Isaac, but Isaac can't live there. All right. So the servant put his hand under the thigh of his master Abraham and swore to him as bidden. All right. So far, so good. So then
seems to me the message was, don't screw up. The mission impossible. If you take on this mission, you must succeed. So, and it was a servant, so the servant would have felt very beholden to Abraham, so would have done his best to fulfill his wishes.
Well, we're going to see what the servant's about to do, but I think he's saying you're patur, you're free of this if you don't succeed. But God has said this is going to happen, so don't worry, I'm not too worried. All right, and the servant took 10 of his master's camels and set out, taking with him all the bounty of his master, and he's made his way to Aram Naharaim, to the city of Nahor. 10 camels is a lot of camels, and it's loaded down. So he's planning to bring a rather substantial amount of money to the family of the woman who agrees to become Isaac's wife. And that's a lot of wealth, and it's verified by the beginning of this chapter, of course, which says that God made Abraham very wealthy. So the servant's is doing his best not to leave much to chance. He's got a ton of stuff, like hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of stuff, and he's on his way. All right, questions or comments? Okay.
Is this the same servant that was going to be Abraham's heir when he didn't have any children?
We don't know that. He's not named. Earlier on, Abraham complains to God. He says, you promised me kids, God, but who's going to inherit my stuff but Eliezer? But we can make the inference, and Rashi, I think, and other commentators make the inference, but I think the point of his anonymity sort of transcends whether we guess who he really is. There's something about, if somebody can help me help me understand the literary nature of this, I'd be glad for some assistance. But
the unnamed people in the Bible, in the Hebrew Bible, have tremendous influence. Just look at Lot's daughters.
Okay, so say that again. I'm not sure what you're saying.
What I was saying is that the unnamed people
Right.
have tremendous, long-lasting influence. And the first example that comes to mind is the eldest daughter of Lot, who gave birth to the founder of the Moabites, and Ruth was a Moabite. And Ruth is the great-grandmother of David, and from David comes the Messianic line. So here we have this unnamed woman, and she just reverberates through the centuries.
Yeah.
In fact, the unnamed people can be more interesting than the named people.
Right, well, that was my point earlier about the mother, that was my point earlier about
Yeah.
the mother and sister of Moses and Pharaoh's daughter. Yeah, you're right.
Mhm.
So he's got, so maybe what you're saying, tell me if this works. The weight of the responsibility on his shoulders is enhanced by his anonymity.
Oh, see, that this is a new take for me. I've always assumed, and I don't know why, but I have always assumed that this was Eliezer for some reason. But I like this anonymity better because he's going to put into action this anonymous servant is going to be the generator of what will become our people just by his actions.
Well,
So
there's a
yeah.
there's a comment in the chat, or women and servants weren't as relevant. Yeah, but we have enough named women, so they're not all anonymous. Just the ones that I'm aware of, that I can think of, the ones we named. But maybe so. And then on the other hand, we have a servant of Abraham named, and that's Eliezer. So I think we'll leave it as a puzzlement. Wendy.
I have a book of children's stories that I used to read in Sunday school, and they ascribe Eliezer as the person in the story.
Now wait a minute.
It's assumed in children's books.
Right. So you're telling me that the author of a children's book names the servant as Eliezer.
Yes.
And you're arguing that that's authoritative.
No, I'm saying it's a common thing that happens, but there doesn't seem to be any reason for it. It's an assumption that's kind of built into a lot of
I
this.
said earlier that Rashi names it as Eliezer, but you know, I don't want to go to the mats on this. But my point is that the author undoubtedly may have been the same author who talked about Eliezer, you know, several Torah portions ago, but that the author had a purpose in not naming him, and so to put a name on him removes the purpose. Although we're having trouble identifying what exactly that purpose might be. But
is there, Rabbi, is there any alliance? What am I trying to say? Are 10 camels the same as the amount of shekels that Abraham paid for Sarah's burial in the cave?
I have
Is there a
I don't think we know the equivalence of that. You know, how much a camel was worth, and because I think this amount at the cave, I think the guy just pulled the number right out of the air.
well, Felice, I want to know. I'm not sure why you're asking the question. Maybe you can help me.
My thinking is that possibly 10 camels are more than burial costs for Sarah, implying, as a segue from Jane's comment, that finding a wife for a woman for Isaac is more important than a burial of his wife.
Okay. Well,
in other words, it stresses the importance. That's what I was thinking.
Well, it's not. First of all, I can't tell you the value of 10 camels in antiquity,
right?
But I suspect it's a ton. I suspect it's a lot of money.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
But let me finish. But don't forget, he's not just showing up with 10 camels. They're all laden with gold and silver and perfume and, you know, clothing and what have you. You know, the best hummus in Canaan he's bringing with him, and as a way of paying for the bride that he intends to bring back. It's not just the camels. He's got, you know, I can only imagine by our value, you know, hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of stuff. Melissa,
and the fact that there's no bargaining, or I don't know the story that continues, but he doesn't bargain I'm thinking of the expression, the derogative, the pejorative, Jew him down. In other words, bargaining for a lesser amount. And there doesn't seem to be that.
No, I don't think that's the intent here, but we'll get to
Yeah.
it now. Melissa, what do you want to
Well,
say?
on this point, I just think that the camels and the money, just in our time, daughters are married off to men with money. This is the traditional idea because women didn't have their own agency. So, Abraham comes with a lot in order to attract the most desirable woman possible and to minimize the possibility that the servant would fail. But I wanted to ask a different question. I'm not sure we dealt with this on another Torah. When we talk about Sarah, we hold her in such reverence, and yet she was awful to Hagar. And particularly as we see the current and ongoing dispute between the descendants of Ishmael and the descendants of Isaac, I've often wondered if Sarah had been a little bit more generous in her spirit, particularly after Hagar gave birth to a child, that we might not have as much conflict now. And I suppose it is that I'm always looking at Torah in terms of how does it affect what's happening today? How does it affect our lives? How does it affect how we decide to actually behave? And this is such a critical, the whole Bereshit or Genesis is such a critical example of relationships amongst people.
Well, I got a couple comments to that. First of all, in some way, what I'm hearing is the assumption that this is actual history. This is not actual history. This is fiction.
Yeah, allegory.
And well, yeah, fiction, allegory and fiction. So to say that the sons of and daughters of Ishmael and the sons of daughters of Isaac would get along better if Sarah was a nicer person just doesn't make any sense to me. It just doesn't make any sense. The Quran is its own book, and it has its own vision of Ishmael, and Ishmael and to my knowledge, and I'm pretty sure I'm right about this, they have no quarrel in the Quran, and in fact, Ishmael and Isaac have no quarrel. When Abraham dies,
right, they got together.
Mysteriously, inexplicably, Ishmael comes back. There are lots of ways of reflecting on the Torah in terms of our own spirituality and morality, but the sons and daughters of Ishmael and Isaac didn't really run into significant conflict, although there was more conflict among Jews living in Arab lands than we tend to know about until the Jews wanted to have a state of their own. But I wouldn't attribute today's quarrels because Sarah wasn't a nice enough woman.
I hear what you're saying, and I don't disagree with you that using the Bible or the Torah as literal, though some people do, is a positive. And yet I do think that evaluating what we learn, and particularly with Sarah and her deciding, both of them, and Abraham relenting and letting his wife toss Hagar and Ishmael out into the desert, really reflects poorly on both of them. And the fact that Ishmael came back after Abraham died and tried and did make peace with Isaac is a positive. And I just raise it in that context. And I realize that it's not, obviously directly related to what's happening now, except it does send the message that people can get along. And there are quite a number of people in the Middle East who do take Torah and the Bible literally. So, to me, it's just an example of where, in the end, there can be peace amongst brothers. And that to me is a lot more important than what does a camel cost? It's like today the guy would come with a lot of Mercedes. What can I tell you? And it's the age old, the richest guy gets the skinniest bleach blonde, boob enhanced woman.
As a matter of fact, as we move into the story, we'll find that all these assumptions are wrong.
Right.
That the wealth is there for after the fact. But I will say, one of the courses I'm going to teach in my Thursday class is women in the Bible. And what I do in this class, I mean, it's a short class, so it can't be exhaustive. I'll take Sarah, Rebecca, Leah, Rachel, Eve, Devorah, Miriam, and we'll look in Esther, of course, Esther. And when you look at the character of Sarah, like any good character in any great body of literature, she's much more nuanced than we might think. She's a much more nuanced character. It's true, we would prefer she didn't expel Hagar and Ishmael, but it worked out well for them, right? As Ishmael is suffering, they get rescued and they're promised their own progeny, and that's rather more the purpose of that story, I think, than for us to condemn Sarah. It's rather more the Torah telling us how this other nation came to be. It's an origin story, right? If you think, rather than think of it as negative, I mean, I'm not, look, these are literary characters. These aren't people. I'm not asking you to forgive Donald Trump. These are literary characters. But I just think that the point is that the character of Sarah, A, is more nuanced, and B, this behavior on her part is to get us to an origin story of another great people, which the Torah recognizes. In fact,
I won't be forgiving Donald Trump. Don't worry. There's nothing nuanced about him.
I haven't read this book in a long time. My friend Reuven Firestone wrote his doctoral dissertation on Abraham and Isaac in Jewish and in Arabic literature, Muslim literature. I don't have the book here with me; it's back in Greensboro, but I'm sure but nevertheless, let's. Is there something else I wanted to say about that? No, okay. I mean, it's a good point. It's always I mean, my point was not necessarily to evaluate the value of every camel, but to point out that this servant is bringing with him a piece of the wealth that the text tells us at the beginning of the chapter Abraham has. But you'll see that the purchase of the bride is after the fact. If you haven't read this story before, and this story is really about the saintliness of the woman. So let's press forward. Oh, okay. Actually, I guess take us back a verse, please. So the servant took his camels, made his way to. Okay, so like I say about a lot of things, time and place are irrelevant. Suddenly they're at the place, and the camels kneel down by the well outside the city at evening time, the time when women come out to draw water. So bada boom, bada bing, he's made the journey of several days, several weeks, and he's there. He's at the well, and the cows are kneeling down. If you take me back up to the Hebrew, please, Wendy. I just want to point out something to you. Those of you who can read Hebrew, Vayivarech hagamalim michutz la'ir el be'er hamayim. So your first impulse might be to say, and the camel's blessed outside of the city, but the word berach, the primary meaning of the word berach is to bow, is to kneel, and out of that comes the word blessing, not the other way around. So the text is using the primary meaning of the word to refer to reference how the camels are behaving. They're there, they're bowing there, and so this is when the women come to draw out. And the servant says, "O Yahweh God, my master Abraham's house, grant me good fortune this day, and deal graciously with my master Abraham." Continue, please. "Here I stand by the spring as the daughters of the townspeople come out to draw water. Let the maiden to whom I say, please lower your jar that I may drink, and who replies, drink, and I will also water your camels. Let her be the one whom you decreed for your servant Isaac. Thereby shall I know that you have dealt graciously with my masters." So this goes back to Jane's comments, and also just this last comment, as this develops rather quickly. The servant is just there. He may or may not have a notion why Abraham sends him back here. He doesn't know. He's not looking for a woman from a specific family. He's in a setting here where he's looking for kindness from a woman. And he, the servant, doesn't have any idea who this woman might be. Turns out it's mishpocha, as you probably know. It's mishpocha, but he doesn't know that. He's just looking for a good woman, a kindly disposed and charitable woman. He had scarcely finished speaking by he who terem kilav, just he's about to finish, when Rebekah, who was born to Bethuel, the son of Milcah, the wife of Abraham's brother Nachor, came out with her jar on her shoulder. Bada boom, bada bing, Jane, you were right. It's mishpocha, right? It's not just some anonymous woman. It's not the daughter of Louis and Frida. It's related to Abraham's brother. Now, you got to know, by the way, Abraham pulled himself away from that family. They're not monotheists, right? They don't have a relationship with Elohim, but there's something in the blood, right? There's something in the blood, and actually this never occurred to me before, and to some extent, this is I've got what I'm about to try to say comes out of Jane's comment. These are not, Abraham isn't inviting these people over for Shabbos. They don't come for Pesach, right? They're there, and he's where he is. They are where they are, and they were a pagan family. Now the Midrashic tales about Abraham's family as arch pagans because they make statues, that's not in the Bible. The Bible doesn't know anything about that. But what is the Bible telling us? That there's some kesher between Abraham and this family, and the same holds true, of course, when Jacob runs away and he gets connected with actually the same family. With Laban is going to have a role in this place. Laban and Rebekah are sisters, brothers and sister. So.
And also, Rabbi, they would have seen Abraham leave. This family would be Nahor and his family would be very cognizant of Abraham leaving because they were all together before Lech Lecha. So Abraham must have been talked about in the family over the course of years, that crazy. I wonder how that crazy Abraham is doing, and hearing this voice that he says comes from a God, the only God. So while it looks miraculous, but the circumstances are all there for everything to fall into place. This is family. This is bloodline. This is a person, Rebecca is a person who at least knows about Abraham. So being told, I want you to come with me, go back to my master Abraham. Oh, by the way, he's your uncle and, you're marrying your cousin. It probably resonated with her. I mean, she's not being taken to a complete and utter stranger. This is bloodline.
Yeah.
And bloodline.
And to add on to what Jane's saying, all the more reason for Abraham to send, to send a servant with 10 camels and all of that wealth. I mean, he's showing the people that he left behind that he has made it, at least in one sense. They don't know what his religious life or his spiritual life is like, but they know that he's very wealthy and successful and far more likely to send off somebody from the family to go with him, I would think.
Yeah, all of that fits in. So what does this young woman do? Scroll down, please. The maiden was very beautiful and a virgin. Now here we got an interesting Torah. Okay, never mind. That's a good translation. I was mixing myself up here. V'na'ar tovat mar'eh ma'od b'tula Ish lo yada'a. Oh, that's the virgin part. Ish lo yada'a. She was a virgin. V'tered ha'aniyah v'timole kida v'ta'a. So the woman was very beautiful, and a virgin, no man having known her. She went down to the spring, filled her jar, and came up. The servant ran toward her and said, "Please, let me sip a little water from your jar." So very, just a little sip. "Drink, my lord," she said, and she quickly lowered her jar upon her hand and let him drink. Continue, please. When she had let him drink his fill, she said, "I will also draw for your camels until they are finished drinking." Quickly emptying her jar in the trough, she ran back to the well to draw, and she drew for all the camels. Continue. The man, meanwhile, stood gazing at her, silently wondering whether Adonai had made his errand successful or not. When the camels had finished drinking, the man took a gold nose ring weighing a half shekel and 2 gold bands for her arms, 10 shekels in weight. "Pray tell me," he said, "whose daughter are you? Is there room in your father's house for us to spend the night?" Now, just note, by the way, she's beautiful. She's a virgin. She gives the guy water, but not only does she give the guy water, she continues to go back and forth to get enough water for the camels. And now the purpose of the 10 camels is now sort of different. I mean, that's a lot of work. That's a lot of work, watering 10 camels. And so the mating process begins, right? She does something without, and is there any sense at this point, before he gives her the nose ring and the bracelets, is there any notion here that there's any reward to this? No, it seems to be an act of pure generosity. She's and it probably takes a long time. I don't know how much, and keep in mind, of course, it just occurred to me, camels drink a lot of water. That's what they have humps for. They've just come a long way. So their humps are empty. So the image the author is giving us here is that she's working really hard for no tangible reward. And that's when the servant knows that he's still a little fuzzy, but he's pretty sure he's found the right woman. And it didn't take very long, which of course tells us, so who is hovering over this whole story at this point? How did this woman show up at the right time in the right place?
God.
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 Yeah.
But it's interesting that Abraham sent all of that wealth for his reason, but it was the servant's idea as to how to find the right woman. He's the one that set the criteria that she should be kind, that she should respond to him and to the camels, and it was the servant's idea. So
very good, yeah.
Yeah, but clearly it's God, it's God setting up the whole thing. So.
God is the great matchmaker.
The ultimate cute meat, right? The first cute meat. Meet cute. Is that the expression, meet cute? Yeah, I think it's the meet cute. Anyway.
I've never heard that before.
It's the basis of every rom-com. So anyway. This is the first rom-com.
Yeah, but one of the people isn't even there, Betsy. I mean, it's not like she's marrying the servant. He's not even there.
It's still, he's going to take her back to, the head honcho, the big guy. So it all works out.
No, in the rom-com, Isaac goes the other direction and they miss each other, and they're both in the opposite city. That's how
I can just see Meg Ryan and Tom Hanks. It's all there.
So she replies, "I am the daughter of Bethuel, son of Milcah, whom she bore to Nahor." And then the servant goes, or there's music in the background, bum, 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 or some such. We already know, the narrator has already told us of her lineage. Now he knows, and everything's going to be good. And so she went on, there's plenty of straw and feed at home, and also room to spend the night. And now, and the man bowed low in homage to God. So, and what is that telling us? He's telling us the servant knows that he's found the woman, and said, "Blessed be Adonai, God of my master Abraham's house, who has not withheld his steadfast faithfulness from my master, for I have been guided on my errand by Adonai to the house of my master's kin." And so he knows this is mishpocha. I don't what's the kinship relationship here between Isaac and Rebecca? Can you
They're
figure?
cousins.
Yeah. In my family, in my grandmother, my maternal grandmother's family, I forget how this goes exactly. There were the Rudishes and the Lobels, and a Rudish married a Lobel, and they were second cousins. And although that was acceptable by Jew, and this happened in America. In America, second cousins don't marry each other. But if I recall correctly, I know they were second cousins, but it was a bit of a scandal because in America, except if you're going to make bad jokes about the South, cousins don't marry each other in this country. But in Jewish law, it's permissible. So the maiden ran and told all this to her mother's household. Now Rebecca had a brother whose name was Laban, and since we know the story, we go moving forward. We go boom, 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 right? Laban is Jacob's father-in-law, right? But now he's just a kid. He's a young adult. Laban ran, and we're gonna get some hint as to Laban's character presently. She ran out to the man at the spring, and now Laban looks at he looks at the gold that she's wearing, the bling that she's wearing, and he runs out there. He smells money. And when he saw here we go. When he saw the nose ring and the band on his sister's arms, and when he heard his sister Rebecca say, "Thus the man spoke to me," he went up to the man who was standing beside the camels at the spring. "Come, O blessed of Yahweh," he said. "Why do you remain outside when I have made ready the house and a place for the camels?" Keep going, please. So the man entered the house, and the camels were unloaded. The camels were given straw and feed, and water was brought to bathe his feet and the feet of his entourage under him.
Wait, can I ask a question?
Yeah.
How does he know that it's Yahweh?
Exactly.
How does he know that? If
Yeah, I had the same question.
All right, step back. Go back, please.
Go back. How does he know that?
Because it doesn't make sense, because if they're pagans,
exactly,
how would they know? Are they also practicing some sort of monotheism? Is this a way of the Torah telling us that Abraham had made that known to the extended family, and that they were worshiping Adonai?
But Abraham didn't say go. He didn't tell the servant who to go to.
I know. No, I was just wondering if this branch of the family had independently come to worship Adonai, if they had reached that stage. I always assumed they were Jewish until today.
I kind of did too.
They were monotheists, at least until today.
But how would he have recognized? Let's say the family was monotheistic. How would Laban have recognized that the servant was from Adonai? That he was.
Doesn't the servant invoke God's name, and then Rebecca comes back and tells Laban the story? Did I miss that? I thought he says it in front of her.
Go back a little bit.
Let's go back and see.
He said, "I, the God of my master's house."
And then she went back and told them all.
Uh-huh.
I've been guided by God, by
Okay.
Yahweh.
Go back just a little more, Wendy.
Yeah.
Man, Lord, I don't see this as him talking to her directly. I think he's in prayer.
But
Yeah.
she's there and she hears it and she reports it all. It says in line 28, right? She told all of this to the
Oh,
household.
that's right. That's right.
I mean, I think that's a credible. I think that's credible.
Okay.
But
Okay,
but for the guy to, nevertheless, I think the question is still legitimate. And my response is, like I said before, about the servant, the sailors on the boat, and the Ninevites, and Yitro and Bilam. Bilam's a little different, I guess. All of these people acknowledge the existence of God, but they're not Hebrews.
There's another explanation, and that is that when she identifies herself, the servant, or it doesn't say so, but may have identified himself as from the house of Abraham. And this is partially in response to seeing the gold that was given to her and the fact that it came. In other words, it's sort of a compliment, or yeah, come in, senator, or come in, you who, are a believer in Yahweh, because they obviously have seen the wealth that the servant brings with him. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, it's fine. It's fine. So let's press forward on this. So the man entered the house, and the camels were unloaded. The camels, we read this already. And when the food was set before him, he said, "I will not eat until I have told my tale." And now it's all going to come out. "I am Abraham's servant," he began. And everybody goes, now everybody's jaw drops. Now what was said earlier, they're all thinking, God, my brother really made it out there. He founded a high-tech company, and he's loaded down with money, and here he is with all this stuff. And keep in mind, if they put the camels down, to rest, that means they have to unload the camels with whatever. We don't know exactly what they were laden with, but they were laden with a lot. "As blessed my master was become rich, giving him sheep and cattle, silver and gold, male and female slaves, camels and asses." Going. "And Sarah, my master's wife, bore my master a son in her old age, and he assigned to him everything he owns." Eyes start getting very large. "Now my master has made me swear, saying, you shall not get a wife for my son from the daughters of the Canaanites in whose land I dwell, but you shall go to my father's house, to my kindred, and get a wife for my son." Now stop. He did not say that, right? He did not say that to the servant. All he said was, go back there. Am I right? So the servant is rewriting history. Why is he doing that?
He's overselling the miracle of finding them, right? He's saying, not just was I sent, of all places that I should stop and water, I found exactly the person that he sent me for. So he's just putting a fine point on it, that to him this was divine providence, and he wants to make sure they see it as, as completely the intended work of God, right?
Well, it also makes it more deliberate on Abraham's part. Abraham told me to come back to you guys and get a wife from the family. It's more flattering to the family, I think.
Yeah, yes, it's both of those, I think. But here you just happen to have a daughter of marriageable age, so I said to my master, "What if the woman doesn't follow me?" Let's read a couple more verses. He replied to me, "God, whose ways I have followed, will send a messenger with you to make your errand successful, and you will get a wife for my son from my kindred, from my father's house," continuing this white lie. Thus only shall you be freed from my adjuration. If when you come to my kindred they refuse you, only then only then shall you be freed from my adjuration. I came today to the spring, and I said that, oh Yahweh, God of my master Abraham, if you would indeed grant success to the errand on which I am engaged, as I stand by the spring of water, let the young woman who comes out to draw, and to whom I say, please let me drink a little water from your jar, who answers, you may drink, and I will also draw for your camels. Let her be the wife whom Yahweh has decreed for my master's son. I had scarcely finished praying in my heart when Rebekah came out with her jar on her shoulder and went down to the spring and drew. And I said to her, please give me a drink. I want to read a little bit more, then I got a question. She quickly lowered her jar and said, drink, and I will also water your camels. So I drank, and she also watered the camels. I inquired of her, whose daughter are you? And she said, the daughter of Bethuel, son of Nachor, whom Milcah bore to him. And I put the ring on her nose and the bands on her arms. I then bowed low in homage and blessed to Yahweh, and blessed Yahweh, the God of my master Abraham, who led me the right way to get the daughter of my master's brother for a son. Now, if you mean to treat my master with true kindness, tell me, and if not, also tell me also, that I may turn right or left.
Oh, look,
What?
the next paragraph, because Laban says this, that the matter was decreed by Adonai.
We cannot speak to you bad or good. Now, I think something's going to happen momentarily. And here's a kind of reciprocity. We know what Laban's like with Jacob. Right? He cheats Jacob at least once, right? He's a bit of a conniver. So right, the matter was decreed by Yahweh, but he's a little bit attracted to all that bling sitting out next to the camels. He knows this is coming to his family. Plus, he knows that Isaac is going to inherit Abraham's wealth. But my question is, what? And I don't have a good answer for this. I'm just asking this as a question that we might want to talk about for a minute. What is the literary purpose of the servant recapitulating that whole story pretty closely, except for that one bit that we identified, to Laban? I mean, we know the story. The narrator, all the narrator has to tell us is, the servant, however you say recapitulate in biblical Hebrew, and the servant recapitulated everything that happened at the well. Why? What's the purpose? What's the purpose of the repetition in such detail?
My first thought, it was a recap for the storytelling.
Tell me, it is a recap, but tell me what you mean by for the storytelling.
Well, if someone's telling the story, verbally, like this was probably done at one time, it helps remind everybody what was going on immediately before, catches them up. If it was broken into parts where they only read part of it or talked about part of it, then this would help them remember what happened before.
I like that. So if you think of it as an oral tradition, or even if not as necessarily an oral tradition, but a text that's being read aloud to a largely illiterate audience, it serves the purpose of reminding us, even as the story, even as in the context of the story, the servant is telling Laban. I like that. Anything else?
Yeah, well, I think, I like to remember the main character in this whole book is God. And this reminds us of God's active role in the story. And it's emphasizing why this is not just a historical narrative. This is a religious story. And it's a story of, a man who traveled across a large amount of land on a, on a hope that, what he was sent to do, and then it all came true in the way that he could have best possibly imagined. So that would inspire some faith. And I think maybe that's to give us some thought that maybe we should have a little blind faith occasionally, that we're on the right journey.
All right, very good. Joan?
Yeah, I noticed that when the servant went off, Abraham did not ask him to get somebody from his family, but from his land, where he used to live. And here, the retelling of the story seems to say that the servant repeats that she is from the family. So is he trying to sort of underline that this is the right choice and his job is done, or trying to influence the family to accept the deal? I don't know, but I noticed that they talk now about from Abraham's family, and he did not say that when he gave the instructions to the servant.
Okay, all right. Betsy?
I think Wendy had her hand up first.
I didn't see Wendy's hand up. I'm sorry,
Yeah.
go ahead.
Yeah, my hand my hand blends in with my background screen.
That's
so
right.
it's hard to
Yes,
see.
I see it now. Okay.
Yeah, well, I was going to comment on how, broadly speaking, the Torah is fairly concise and it doesn't repeat itself terribly often. So if you're going to repeat this right away, it kind of indicates to me the active role that God is playing in choosing Rebecca. That's how I see it.
Good. All right. All right. Betsy?
So, I mean, I totally agree with Wendy. This is the next generation of our people. And I think it's repeated to emphasize that. I mean, we start out with Abraham and Sarah. We've got, Isaac, and now, the family is going to grow now. We're going to become a people. And I think the retelling of the story is to emphasize our history and our growth, and our development as a people. And I think that's what the emphasis is for.
So you're saying it's kind of a foretelling, that it's a kind of way of letting us know, after all the surahs that Abraham and Sarah went through, we can have some degree of confidence that through God's grace,
Right, and God has promised to make Abraham a great nation, and so we're seeing that play out. And this is the next step, lead us to Jacob, and then to becoming a nation. So I think it's just a really important step in the development of our rise as a people, as our family expands.
All right, so I have to tell you, when I asked that question, I wasn't sure that it would resonate, but those responses were all very good, and really, I mean, we don't know what, or even if what the author had in mind, or if the author knew. I mean, we assume writers have some degree of control over their writing, but those are all really good answers, and I like them all. The notion that it's right, the text rarely repeats itself, and so maybe this is all a way of saying that as good as things can get in the book of Genesis, they're going to be good. All right, so let's see what goes on.
I just had one other comment on that, is that although it turns out that Rebecca is a virgin and beautiful, I really, really appreciate that what the servant was looking for in a wife for Isaac was that she was kind.
Yeah.
Now, her character doesn't always play out that way. I mean, I'm not sure Rebecca is kind all the time, but I like that quality in her being emphasized. And I think to the point about, Sarah had her, she was not a perfect person. None of the matriarchs or patriarchs are perfect people. And that, I think, is what makes them really, really interesting, that we all really mess up big time. And could we rewrite history and rewrite the way we do things? Our family histories, if nothing else, would be different, but that's just not how it goes. And that's the nature of being human. And I think our stories always reflect that.
So what is it that you're thinking of when you say Rebecca isn't always kind?
Well, the way she favors Jacob, the way she deceives her husband, these are not qualities that I would consider being kind.
Well, but without that, we would be the children of Abraham, Isaac, and Esau.
Well, I know, and God is behind it, but and I do, and that's why I said I appreciate that quality of kindness was what he was looking for, and maybe through most of her life she was. I'm just saying that, like all of us, none of us, I really value that quality. That's a value in a person I really admire, but it doesn't mean that person is that way all the time. And I think Rebecca is proof of that.
Okay,
She
so
has
we're gonna
other
see-
sides of her.
We're going to see a little bit more about Rebecca here, and I am going to call this at noon, and I would like if we can to get to the end. I'm getting a note that 2 participants have raised hands, but has everybody spoken? Oh, yeah. All right, Wendy, I can't see the damn hand. Okay, Wendy, and then Jane.
I'll have to change my background picture for you.
It's the
Well,
periodic, it's the periodic table. Don't change
Yeah.
the background.
Regarding what Betsy was saying and how Rebecca favors Jacob later on, well, sibling rivalry is a recurring theme throughout the Torah. And it's a recurring theme in, real life as well. I mean, it's kind of part of that also, in a sense, might, acknowledge her humanity, because it happens, a lot where parents favor one child over another. And it's, even though it's not good, it also does show that she's human.
Yeah, I don't want to speak for Betsy, but I think that's what she was saying.
Yeah, I agree completely, Wendy. Yeah.
All right, so let's. I want to press through this down a couple verses, because I want to. Let's just read through this. Here is Rebecca before you. Take her and go. Let her be a wife to your master's son, as Yahweh has spoken. Now, us moderns aren't real happy about that. The brother giving away the sister, and I'm not going to apologize for it. But I will say, well, let's press on this. I want to get to a little bit more. Then Abraham's servant heard their words, bowed low to the ground before Yahweh. The servant's doing a lot of bowing to Yahweh. The servant brought out objects of silver and gold and garments and gave them to Rebekah. He gave presents to her brother and her mother, and they're all jaw-dropping with this great wealth that's being bestowed upon them. Please continue. Then he and the entourage under him ate and drank, and they spent the night. When they arose the next morning, he said, "Give me leave to go to my master," the servant says. But her brother and her mother said, "Let the maiden remain with us some 10 days. Then you may go." Now, what's this about? Let's continue. He said to them, "Do not delay me. Now that Yahweh has made my errand successful, give me leave that I may go to my master with, of course, this woman." And they said, "Let us call the girl and ask her for her reply." They called Rebekah and said to her, "Will you go with this man?" Thinking that she's going to play along. "I want to stay another 10 days with Mom and Dad." And she said, "I will." So it's a small act, maybe not such a small act. She's defying the will of the mother and the brother. And so I think this says something. This is the point. This says something else about Rebecca, besides that she's kind. She's got a will of her own. And that will of her own is, of course, what exercises itself in that deception with Jacob and Isaac at the end of Isaac's life. So they sent off their sister Rebecca and her nurse along with Abraham's servant and his entourage. Vayivarachu et Rivka, Vayomru la Achotenu at Chaye le'alfei rivava, Vayirash zarech et Sha'ar Sonav. So they blessed Rebekah and they said to her, "O sister, may you grow into thousands of myriads. May your descendants seize the gates of their foes." Does this ring a bell to anybody? If we were,
This is God's promise to
no,
Abraham.
no, there's a specific answer to this, and that goes back to chapter 12, when
Oh.
God says to Abraham that you will seize the gates of your foes. This is the exact same language. Vayirash zarach et sha'ar sonav. That's one of those cases where there's one answer. Now you might interpret it further, Jane, but that was the point I wanted to make.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Now, she linguistically, her fate, her destiny is now being mindfully connected to that of Abraham. Harvey?
Am I missing something? What happened to the father in this? The father
Yeah.
doesn't seem to have any say in this.
It doesn't come up. So let me think about this. I don't have a paper book with me. I can't answer that well. Actually, is this going here?
It's almost like Laban has taken over the role of the father in the negotiations.
Right. Actually, give me a second, okay? Because I think I may have an answer, or I may not. But give me just a second.
Is the father even alive?
Well, that's what I'm looking up. I think I know the answer to that. All right, so Abram and Nahor, brothers, took to themselves wives. The name of Abram's wife being Sarai, that of Nahor being Milcah, the daughter of Haran, the father of Milcah and Iscah. Now Sarai was barren, she had no child. Terach took his son Abram, his grandson Lot, son of Haran, and his daughter-in-law Sarai, wife of his son. There's a lot of genealogy here. No, I thought it said something here. This is chapter 11. This is the end of chapter 11 in Genesis, but it's not saying anything. So we don't know where Nahor is. It's a good question. I don't know the answer.
Just
Rebecca,
look one thing up, and they say that Bethuel is her father, and that's who's mentioned as being in there with talking with Laban. It says Laban and Bethuel said. So that's
all right. I'm being a little vague here. What chapter is that? What verse? I mean,
when we go back up a couple of lines, it says Laban and Bethuel said to her. But then later it says the brother and the mother. So it does say Bethuel and Laban together, just a little bit up from here. There. Laban and Bethuel answered. So that's saying that's the father and son.
yeah, that got by me. I'm sorry, that got by me, and I was identifying the wrong person as the father. So I can speculate an answer, and the
Go up a little bit further because there's more genealogical information up, just a paragraph.
Who- And who is Nahor?
Nahor was a brother of Abraham. He was one of Abraham's brothers.
Yeah, whose daughter? I quote her, whose daughter are you? And she said, the daughter of Bethuel. Oh, so Bethuel is male, right?
yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, okay. That's
And
what
he was the son of Nahor.
Yes.
And
So-
Nahor is Abraham's brother.
And Nahor is Abraham's brother. Yeah.
So this is basically what, Abraham's grandniece? or something
Yes.
like that.
Yes. That's right.
So the guess that I'm going to take, I have one or two possibilities. One is a joke, so I won't even make it, and that's that Laban emerges here as the powerful figure. I mean, I'm just sort of saying as a matter of fact, Laban emerges as a powerful figure. I don't know anything about ancient kinship rules, and he emerges again with Jacob as a powerful figure. It's about the best I can say, except maybe the father had dementia, and he was just. I don't have a better
Ted,
answer than anyway.
I think, Rabbi, it's foreshadowing because we're going to meet Laban, and here his sister says, no, his sister says, no, I'm not staying with you for 10 days. I'm leaving. I'm going immediately with this man to the family of my new husband. And we know that Laban's daughters leave him with Jacob, and there's nothing he can do about it, because when he tries to get his own property back, he can't do it because one of them is sitting on it, and she says, I'm menstruating, I can't get up.
Yeah,
And she's sitting on the household god. So one of the things I'm really enjoying as we're reading through this is how much foreshadowing there is in this story, not only with the other stories in Bereshit, but also in Shemot, because Rebecca is doing the thing that God commanded us to do, which is to remember that we were strangers in a strange land. This servant is a stranger in a strange land. And as Betsy has pointed out very specifically, Rebecca is being kind to him, which is what we are supposed to do to the stranger. And I just love the tie-in here, this foreshadowing of our journey to become a nation, not just a people, but a nation.
yeah. Now, by the way, I didn't point out, or I didn't point this out clearly enough. The delay of 10 days. The idea wasn't let's hang around here for 10 days. We'll go up to the spa, we'll take in the hot water, take in the waters, and go to all the restaurants. It's like saying the end of 10 days comes, and then they'll say, oh, let's wait another 10 days and another 10 days. And the idea ultimately is we're not going to let Rebecca go with you, but rather we're going to rip you off. You gave us all this stuff, and she ain't leaving. And then, but I don't think in this case, I don't think I'm reading between the lines too strongly. She understands the deception that's afoot, and she says, hell no, you get the stuff, and I'm going, a deal is a deal, and I want to start my new life, and that's it. And probably living with Laban was no great shakes anyway. But I want to get to the end. We're really cutting to the hour here, but we got to see this. So continue. So Rebecca and her maids arose, mounted the camels, followed the man. So the servant took Rebecca and went his way. Continue. Isaac had just come back from the vicinity of Be'er Lahai Roy, where he was settled in the region of the Negev. And Isaac went out walking in the field toward evening, and looking up, he saw camels approaching. Raising her eyes, Rebecca saw Isaac. She alighted from the camel. Stop right there for a second. Now, that's probably, almost certainly the intention of the Hebrew. The verb is vatipol me'al hagamal, gamal. And, but another way of saying it is she fell off the camel. And that could be interpreted, if you read it that way, either she saw the shmegegi she was about to marry, And she said, what have I done to myself? Or she was so impressed by what she saw, she fell off the camel. But still, alighted is probably the right term. And said to the servant, who is that man walking in the field toward us? And the servant said, that is my master. So she took her veil and covered herself in the time-honored way of brides before their husbands. The servant told Isaac all the things that he had done. Isaac, now here's the, can you bring it up just a little bit more? No, the other way. The other way. So this is the last sentence in the chapter. Isaac then brought her into the tent of his mother Sarah, and he took Rebekah as his wife. Sarah loved her and thus found comfort after his mother's death. So does Dr. Freud happen to be on the call here?
Yeah, I would think that's awfully intimidating. It's like having sex for the first time on your parents' bed.
Ha! But let's play with this verse for a minute or two before we call it a day. When you take down the screen share, please. There we go. So what is that text telling us? And I think this harkens back to the Akedah. It tells us something about Isaac. I mean, why doesn't he go into his own tent? Why does he take her into his mother's tent? And as Jane said, they have sex in mom's tent. Now, forgetting the uckiness of that, what is the text telling us about this guy? Probably more about Isaac, certainly more about Isaac than Rebekah. Jason.
Well, I just think I know that if I'm not mistaken, Jews didn't put the titles to the Torah portions, right? So life of Sarah, in which she is never alive, is an odd thing. But to me, maybe this is bringing it back to her as this is her lineage. This is her life extended. This is her next generation moving on and creating the next generation after. And that is therefore extending her life as a matriarch, because now there will be grandchildren and there will be, descendants from her.
I like that, and I have to say you're being very kind toward kind toward Isaac. But okay, extending. All right, so it's a way, with the word foreshadowing on the table. This is a way of saying, and it's what Betsy I think said earlier, right? The lineage is now assured for at least another generation. Joan and then Betsy.
I wonder if this has any allusion to the fact that Jews, it's a matriarchal line of descent of being Jewish, and that if that is symbolic of going to the mother's tent.
Not in the halachic way that I think you're suggesting, because this is way too early for that. I mean, Abraham and Moses marries a Gentile, and his kid, and who else marries? That whole issue doesn't really arise until late into the Tanakh. But it's a nice I don't see that. But in another way, as the way it's already been suggested, that this is a way of continuing the lineage. Betsy?
Well, it just occurs to me, in many cases, we consider that Isaac is probably the most damaged of the patriarchs. I mean, he's very submissive with the Akedah. He has a father who tried to kill him, a mother who wasn't present for that and didn't try to intervene. His mother, I think, just as recently died. And he says he's looking for comfort. I think he's probably of all of our matriarchs. Of all our patriarchs, but he's troubled, I think, and a wife will bring him comfort, and I think he needs his mother's blessing to go forward. So I don't know. I see it as part of a very needy man, and looking to women in his life to comfort him. And again, I don't think Rebekah always does that.
Ruth, and then Harvey, I think you get the last word. Ruth.
Well,
first.
maybe I should do this at the very end, because I saw the line where it talked about that the descendants will always vanquish all their foes. And I think of the history of the Jews and what they have gone through. And I'm talking about from time, the beginning. And of course, I would like to hope that even in these troubled times, that with that kind of prophecy about vanquishing your foes in the future, that we've been able to survive after all of the things that we've gone through. So I think not so much the Torah portion, but what it has said, that even though you're going to go through some very terrible times, which of course we have, and of course we are right now, and I hope that it is true that we will vanquish our foes. So I wanted to end with that, but I guess it's not the end of the discussion.
But well put, Harvey.
I was just curious, why is the tent, Sarah's tent, still up if she's dead?
I think it, Harvey, maybe it had something to do with the grieving process, because this search for a wife seems to be coming very quickly on the heels of Sarah's death. And it's just like us. I mean, when someone dies, it often takes months before you clear out the closet and start to give away the clothes and start rearranging things for your own living situation, as opposed to sharing space with someone. So it may be a way of Abraham's commemorating Sarah, especially considering some of the things that he did to her. That's my take on it.
Nice, very nice. I think you could almost have a whole class on sibling rivalry based on these two, this one and the next one, where the parents are have totally dysfunctional relationships with their children, Ishmael and being one, and then later the next story, you have the taking the birthright away, you know, and you have another, and basically the brothers come back to each other at the end, but the parents are the dysfunctional ones, not the children.
Well, I mean, the subtext of the whole book of Genesis, right? Cain and Abel, Isaac and Ishmael, and Jacob and Esau, Joseph and his brothers. It's a handbook on how not to be a parent and how not to be a sibling.
Well, even Rachel and Leah have their difficulties.
Rachel and Leah, yeah. And name a sibling relationship in the Hebrew Bible in the book of Genesis that goes well. Now you can speculate. I mean, they were they were all maybe some of Joseph's brothers got along with each other, but you know the main character, the siblings who are the main characters in this book, none of them get along with each other. It's an interesting, you know.
About Aaron and Moses.
That's not the book of Genesis.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Okay, folks. I don't know that anybody's on this call is interested, but I had to cancel last week's bar and bat mitzvah class, so there's one more week of taking in new students if you're interested, and then it's going to be closed. Next Friday night, the AME Church, which I was reminded last night is African Methodist Episcopalian Church, which itself has a really one interesting origin story, by the way. A local one will be joining us with their choir, and their preacher is preaching. It should be a really good service, so I hope you can make it. And we're beating the bushes for cakes and cookies and cheese and crackers, so it should be a good oneg also.
Did they tell you what songs they're going to sing?
Yeah, I don't remember. I worked it out because I primarily, I mean, for two reasons, both in terms of the rhythm of the service, but I wanted them to make sure they don't pick anything that mentions that other guy. And
that's what I was wondering. Yeah.
And it was a good thing that we did that, because he suggested a song that I first approved of because I was too lazy to look at the lyrics, but Elliot Levine did. and we substituted something else for it.
So
Good.
David rowed the boat ashore is okay, right?
Michael's rowing the boat ashore. Dave is on the other side making lunch.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Okay, folks. Good session as always. Thank you for coming. And
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat
Shabbat
shalom,
shalom.
everybody.
Shabbat shalom.
Yeah, everybody.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.